After a tense family dinner, I found my home safe empty. My mother smiled. "We took it for your sister's tuition." My father added, "Don't make this ugly." They had just given me the legal right to destroy them, so I just said, "Then you won't mind what comes next." This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The ache started as a dull throb behind my eyes during dinner. By the time I was driving home, it had bloomed into a full-blown migraine, a nauseating pressure that made the streetlights blur into painful, starburst shapes. I'd been working 70-hour weeks closing a major audit, and my immune system was non-existent. All I wanted was a dark room and silence. My family, however, had wanted a discussion. "Rebecca, darling," my mother, Martha, had said, sliding the gravy boat an inch to the left. "We need to talk about Mary's tuition. The final payment is due." I'd kept my eyes on my plate. "We've talked about it, Mom. I told you I can't help. That school is financially reckless." "It's her dream," my father, George, boomed from the head of the table. His consultant voice, as I called it, all bluster and authority, backed by absolutely nothing. "You don't get to decide if your sister's dream is reckless." "I do when you're asking me to pay for it," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. My brother, Leo, just stared at his mashed potatoes, and my sister, Mary, the prodigy in question, was busy texting under the table. The conversation devolved from there, a familiar spiral of guilt, entitlement, and passive-aggressive digs at my selfishness. I'd finally pleaded the migraine and fled, their disapproval clinging to me like a physical weight. Back in my own quiet, blessedly dark condo, I fumbled with my keys, the pain in my head so sharp I felt dizzy. I barely registered the small, muddy scuff on the hardwood floor by the study, or the way the door to my walk-in closet was open just a crack. My only thought was the prescription medication I kept in the small home safe, tucked behind a false panel in the closet. I punched in the 6-digit code and pulled the heavy steel door open. It was empty. I stared, uncomprehending. The medication was gone. The small jewelry box I'd inherited from my grandmother was gone, and the stacks of banded cash, over $50,000 I'd been liquidating for the down payment on a house, were gone. My stomach turned to ice. The migraine vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged panic. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth. I was dialing 911 when a shadow fell across the hallway. My mother, Martha, was standing there, holding my spare set of house keys. She was smiling, a bright, triumphant little smile. "Oh, good, you're home," she said, her voice breezy. "I was just tidying up." "You, what?" My voice was a croak. "Mom, the safe, it's empty. Someone robbed me." "Don't be dramatic, Rebecca." She walked past me into the study and sat in my desk chair. "We took it for Mary's tuition." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked behind her. My father, George, was leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. He looked bored. "What did you say?" I whispered. "We took it," Martha repeated, as if speaking to a child. "We knew you wouldn't do the right thing, so we had to intervene. It's for the family, dear, for your sister." You stole from me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of such profound, reality-altering horror that I could barely form the words. "You used my spare key, came into my home, figured out my combination, and stole my life savings." "Now listen," George said, finally pushing himself off the doorframe. His voice was low, threatening. "We don't need this kind of language. We borrowed it. You'll get it back. Eventually. Don't make this ugly, Rebecca." Don't make this ugly. The words echoed in the cold, empty space where my trust used to be. They had broken into my home. They had stolen my future. And they were warning me not to make a fuss. I looked from my father's intimidating stare to my mother's smug, self-righteous smile. They thought this was over. They thought they had won. They saw me as their dutiful, spineless accountant, the family fixer they could push around and guilt into compliance. They had forgotten who I really was. They had forgotten what I really managed. The adrenaline cleared my head, the pain replaced by a chilling, crystalline focus. I am a forensic accountant. I trace, I track, and I dismantle. I lowered my phone. I took a slow, deep breath and met my father's gaze. "Ugly," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "No, you won't mind what comes next then." My mother's smile faltered, just a fraction. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, walking past both of them and pickin'. "Gee up my car keys from the kitchen counter, that you just gave me permission to fix this. Permanently." I left them in my study, a sudden, confused silence hanging in the air. They thought they had stolen my down payment. They didn't realize they had just handed me the keys to their entire world. The theft was worse than any betrayal I could have imagined. The drive to my office was a blur of adrenaline and icy calm. My hands were steady on the wheel. The migraine was gone, burned away by the sheer, cold fury that had taken its place. My parents were still at my condo. I knew their habits. They'd be tidying up more, which meant snooping, helping themselves to my pantry, and justifying their crime to each other until they truly believed they were the heroes of the story. Let them. Let them feel victorious for a little while longer. My office was dark, the building silent at this hour. I swiped my access card, the click-thump of the electronic lock echoing in the empty lobby. My footsteps were sharp on the marble floor. I didn't turn on the main overhead lights in my suite, just the small lamp on my desk. The skyline of the city glittered outside my window, a million lights that suddenly felt very far away. I sat in my high-back leather chair, the one that had always made me feel in control, and I let the first wave of emotion hit me. It wasn't just anger. It was a profound, hollowing grief. My own mother and father. They hadn't just taken money. They had taken my security, my trust, my sense of family. They had looked at my hard-earned future and decided it was theirs for the taking. A single, hot tear traced a path down my cheek, and I wiped it away with a vicious swipe of my hand. No more. I was done being the family shock absorber. I pulled my phone out and dialed. It was late, but I knew she'd pick up. "Elena, it's Rebecca. I'm sorry to call so late." Elena, my grandfather's estate lawyer and now mine, sounded instantly awake. "Rebecca, don't apologize. What's wrong? You sound terrible." "They did it, Elena," I said, my voice flat. "They finally crossed the line, a big one." "What happened?" "They broke into my condo. They opened my safe and took everything. Over $50,000 in cash, plus heirlooms." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Martha and George, are you certain?" "They admitted it, bragged about it, said it was for Mary's tuition and warned me not to make it ugly." For a full 10 seconds, there was only silence. When Elena finally spoke, her voice was stripped of all pleasantries. It was the voice of the sharpest legal mind I'd ever met. "Do you have them on recording?" "No," I said, "but they're still at my condo. I have security cameras in the hallway and one in the study. I can pull the footage. They'll be on it. Their voices will be clear." "Good, pull it. Back it up twice. Then go to the nearest police station and file a report, Rebecca. A full report for breaking and entering and grand larceny. Get a case number. Do not pass go, do not talk to them, do not answer their calls. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said, "but that's just step 1. "What's step 2? Elena asked. I leaned forward, my eyes tracing the binding of the thickest document on my shelf. It was labeled simply, "The Harrison Family Trust." "Step 2, I said, my voice dropping, "is that I need you to draw up the preliminary notices for invoking Article 12, Section 4. Another silence, this one longer, heavier. "The bad actor clause," Elena breathed. "Rebecca, you know what that means. That's not a warning shot. That's the nuclear option. It's irreversible." "They stole $50,000 from my home, Elena. They used their family status as a weapon. As far as I'm concerned, they just defined themselves as bad actors under the terms of the trust. They just gave me the legal justification I've never had before." "It will liquidate everything," Elena said quietly. "The house, the brewery building, everything." "I know," I said. "They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. They had forgotten one crucial thing, Alina. They forgot who grandfather put in charge. He knew what he was doing, Alina said, a grim respect in her tone. He always said you were the only one with a steel spine, the only one who saw them for what they were. My grandfather, he had been a hard, shrewd man. He built a small real estate empire and in his final years watched with deep disappointment as his son, George, and his daughter-in-law, Martha, frittered away their own opportunities. He'd seen their entitlement, my brother Leo's weakness, and Mary's spoiled nature. And he had seen me, the quiet one, the one who balanced her checkbook to the penny at age 12. When he died, he left his children a small, insulting cash inheritance. But the bulk of his estate, the family home, the commercial building downtown, a portfolio of investments, he'd locked away in an ironclad, unchangeable trust. And he had made me, at age 25, the sole, unremovable trustee. My parents had been furious. They'd tried to contest it, but the will was perfect. For 9 years, I had managed it. I had let them live in the family home rent-free. I had given my brother, Leo, an astonishingly forgiving lease on the commercial building for his brewery. I had distributed the bare minimum dividends, as required by the trust, while I grew the principal, just as my grandfather had instructed. I had shielded them, and in return, they had treated me like their personal bank. They had forgotten one crucial thing, I repeated to myself, pulling the trust document from the shelf. They forgot who holds the keys. Okay, Alina said, her voice all business now. File the police report. Email me the case number and the security footage. I'll start the paperwork. We can have the notices served by courier in 48 hours. Thank you, Alina. I hung up and turned to my computer. It was time to pull the security footage. It was time to make this ugly. My family's sense of entitlement wasn't born overnight. It was cultivated, watered, and fed for decades, primarily by my parents, Martha and George. And I had, for most of my life, been its primary gardener. My role as the fixer started young. I was the one who balanced my mother's checkbook when she just couldn't make the numbers match. The one who co-signed my brother Leo's first car loan because his credit was already a disaster at 22. I was the one who quietly paid the property tax overage on the family home, the home I now legally controlled, when my parents spent their dividend check on a cruise. For 9 years, I had been the responsible, unseen hand guiding the family finances, all while building my own career as a forensic accountant. My job was my escape. It was a world of logic, rules, and consequences. In my 9 to 5, if you moved a decimal point, you were held accountable. In my family, if you stole a future, you were just borrowing. My greatest sacrifice, however, had been my own dream. The $50,000 in that safe wasn't just money, it was my out. It was the down payment on a small house on the coast, a place where I could finally be free of them, a place where no one had a spare key. They didn't just steal cash, they stole my exit plan. And they stole it for Mary. Mary was the artist, the sensitive soul. From the moment she was born, she was bathed in a light neither I nor Leo ever got to stand in. Her tantrums were passion, her failures learning experiences. When she'd announced she was only applying to one of the most expensive private art schools in the country, my parents hadn't blinked. The problem, of course, was paying for it. The trust dividends were not nearly enough. My parents' consulting and managing gigs were figments of their imagination, so they turned to me. The initial approach had been subtle. "Rebecca, darling, you're so good with money," my mother had cooed over the phone 2 months ago. "We're just trying to figure out how to make Mary's dream come true. You've always been so generous." "I can help you draw up a budget, Mom," I'd offered, knowing it was futile. "A budget," she'd laughed, a light, tinkling sound that always set my teeth on edge. "Honey, we're a bit beyond a budget. We're talking about an investment in your sister's future." When I'd politely but firmly explained that I would not be liquidating my own assets for an $80,000 a year tuition, the mood had shifted. My father had taken the next call. "I'm disappointed in you, Rebecca," George had started, his voice dripping with faux paternal gravitas. You're hoarding all this money your grandfather left you. He didn't leave it to me, Dad. He put it in my care. It's not my personal bank account. And the money you're asking for is mine from my salary. Don't be pedantic. It's all family money, he'd snapped. You're letting your sister down. You're letting your family down. This was their dynamic. Martha was the velvet glove, all smiles and emotional manipulation. George was the iron fist, using intimidation, guilt, and a booming voice to steamroll any opposition. They were a two-person operation, and for 34 years, they had been terrifyingly effective. I remembered Mary's last visit to my condo. She'd wandered through my study, picking things up off my desk, her eyes scanning everything. "Wow, Becca," she'd said, trailing a finger along the frame of my diploma. "You have such nice stuff. It must be great to just sit in a quiet room and count your money all day." "It's called a job, Mary," I'd said, not looking up from my laptop. "Right. Well, Mom says you're being really weird about my tuition. My finances are not up for discussion." "You're just selfish," she declared, tossing my crystal paperweight back onto a stack of files. "You have all this, and you won't even help your own sister. It's not fair." I see it now, of course. She wasn't just pouting. She was scouting. She must have seen me open the safe. She was my mother's reconnaissance. The realization settled in my stomach like lead. This wasn't a desperate, impulsive act. It was a planned, multi-step operation. They had discussed it. They had coordinated. My mother, my father, and my sister had conspired to rob me. I finished downloading the security footage. There it was in crisp 1080p. My mother walking into the study, my father standing guard at the door. I watched her hands move on the keypad. She must have spied on me just as Mary had. The beep of the lock, the swing of the door, I watched them, my own parents, methodically emptying the contents into a duffel bag. I watched my mother pause, look at my grandmother's jewelry box, and toss it into the bag as an afterthought. I saved the file. I backed it up to my secure server. Then, I forwarded it to Alina. At 3:15 a.m., I walked into the 24-hour police precinct, and with a calm, steady voice, I told the officer at the desk, "I need to report a robbery. The perpetrators are my parents." The sun was just beginning to cast a weak gray light over the city as I left the police station, a folded piece of paper with a case number clutched in my hand. The air felt thin and cold. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. I was running on a different kind of fuel now, the cold, clean-burning fire of pure, unadulterated certainty. I was no longer a victim. I was a forensic accountant with a case file. And my family was no longer family. They were subjects in an audit, and I was about to find every last one of their discrepancies. The theft of my personal money was the emotional wound, but it was also the legal key. My grandfather, a man who believed in consequences above all, had built the perfect trap. The bad actor clause in the trust was notoriously vague and powerful. It stated that if any beneficiary, Martha, George, Leo, or Mary, should commit an act of gross negligence, criminal malfeasance, or moral turpitude against another beneficiary, me, the trustee, also me, had the sole and absolute discretion to dissolve the trust and redistribute the assets. For 9 years, their bad behavior had been emotional. It was ugly, but it wasn't criminal malfeasance. Now, they had handed it to me on a silver platter. Breaking and entering, grand larceny, I had a police report. I had video evidence. I had, in short, a cannon. My first call wasn't to my family. It was to my office. I called my senior partner, a man who respected my work ethic above all. "Jim," I said, "I have a sudden and critical family emergency. It's legal and it's messy. I need to take a personal leave of absence, effective immediately. It might be a week. It might be 2. "Good Lord, Rebecca," he said, "is everyone okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but they will be once this is settled. I'll be available by email for emergencies, but I need to be off the grid." He knew me well enough not to ask more. He just said to take the time I needed. My second call was to Alina. It's done, I said. I have the case number. I'm emailing it to you now. I'm already drafting the notices, she said. The courier will have them by tomorrow morning. Rebecca, once you serve them, the clock starts. They'll have 30 days to respond, but you'll have the power to file for an immediate injunction on all assets. That means you can change the locks. Good, I said. That's exactly what I want. My third call was to a private investigator I'd used for a complex fraud case last year. Mark, I said, I have a personal job for you. I need a full financial workup on my parents, George and Martha, and my sister, Mary. I want to know where the tuition money actually went. I'm sending you the university's wire transfer details. I want to know if it was paid or if it was pocketed. I want to know about their credit cards, any new purchases, any secret accounts. I need it yesterday. You got it, boss, he said. He knew my work. He knew what forensic meant. My last stop was my condo. I'd already had a locksmith meet me there at dawn. He was finishing up as I arrived. New high-security locks on all 3 doors, he said, handing me a set of keys. These aren't getting picked, and you can't duplicate this key at a hardware store. You're the only one who has a set. Thank you, I said, handing him cash. I walked into my home. It felt violated. My study was just as they'd left it, the closet door still ajar. I spent the next hour documenting everything. I took photos of the scuff marks on the floor, the open safe, the disarray in my desk drawers where my mother had clearly been snooping. I documented my grandmother's missing jewelry, piece by piece. I was building a case, not just for the police, but for the inevitable court battle. As I worked, my phone buzzed, and buzzed, and buzzed. First, it was my mother. Rebecca, where did you go? Yo. You left us worried. Then my father. Rebecca, your mother is upset. Call me. Now. Then a string of texts. Mom, we're just trying to talk to you. Mom, this is very childish, Rebecca. Dad, you'd better not be doing something stupid. Dad, pick up the phone. I am not going to ask again. I watched the messages pile up, my face impassive. They were still in the intimidation phase. They still thought they had the power. They had no idea that their threats were now being screenshotted and added to a legal file labeled Harrison Family Harassment. They had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't their daughter right now. I was their trustee, and the audit had begun. I let them stew for a full 24 hours. My phone's log was a testament to their escalating panic. The calls had moved from annoyed to angry to a string of rapid fire. Texts from my sister, Mary. The tuition was due, and she'd likely gotten an alert. They were realizing that the money they'd stolen hadn't magically appeared in her student account. The following morning, Alina's courier served the notices. One to my parents' home, one to my brother Leo's brewery, one to Mary's dorm. The notice was a masterpiece of cold legal precision. It stated that, as per Article 12, Section 4 of the Harrison Family Trust, an investigation had been opened into a criminal act of malfeasance perpetrated by the beneficiaries. It listed the police report number. It stated that, effective immediately, all trust assets were frozen. This meant the dividend checks were stopping. This meant the operating accounts for the properties were now under my sole, direct control. And it meant that a hearing was being scheduled to begin dissolution and liquidation proceedings. My phone exploded. It wasn't a buzz, it was a sustained, shrieking vibration on my desk. I let it go to voicemail. It was Leo. Rebecca, what is this? What the hell is this legal crap? I just got a letter saying you're dissolving the trust. You're liquidating? That means you're selling the building. My building? My brewery, Becca. This is my whole life. You can't do this. Call me back, damn it. You're destroying me. I saved the voicemail. Evidence. Then my father. The roar on the other end was barely coherent. You dare? A police report? Against your mother? You ungrateful little. I am coming to your office right now, and you are going to fix this. You are going to call off your attack dog lawyer and drop this nonsense. You hear me? You are finished. I saved the voicemail. More evidence. Finally, my mother called. She was crying, hysterically. Rebecca, honey, please, your father is. He's terrifying, he's breaking things. This is all a misunderstanding. You have to stop this. You're tearing the family apart. Please just come over, we can talk. We'll figure out the money, just call off the lawyers. Please, baby, you're scaring me. I didn't save that one, I just deleted it. I waited an hour. Then I drove to the family house. The house my grandfather built. The house I now, for all intents and purposes, owned. I didn't knock. I used my own key, the one they didn't know I had, and walked in. They were in the living room. My father was pacing, his face a mottled, furious red. My mother was crumpled on the sofa, tissues scattered around her. Leo was standing by the fireplace, his face pale with terror. They all froze when they saw me. You, my father spat. You call your lawyer, now you stop this. No, I said. My voice was calm, and it echoed in the sudden, absolute silence of the room. What did you say? He advanced on me. I held up a hand. Don't, Dad, don't make this ugly. Remember. Rebecca, please, my mother wept. This is a mistake. We can get the money back from the school. We'll return it. And there it was, the first great reveal. I smiled, a cold, thin smile that didn't touch my eyes. You can't, I said. My father stopped. What do you mean you can't? I mean, I said, I got the report back from my investigator this morning. You never paid the tuition. The air left the room, my mother's sobs hitched. Leo looked confused. What? You never paid the school, I said, locking eyes with my father. The tuition wasn't due for another week. You stole my money, $50,000, and where did it go, Dad? Because it didn't go to Mary. My father's face went from red to a sickly gray. I know where some of it went, I continued, pulling a piece of paper from my bag. A $20,000 wire transfer to a brokerage account, an account that's been losing money for 6 months. Your consulting business, Dad, or just a bad gambling habit? George stared at me, speechless. And Mom, I said, turning to her, a $15,000 cash payment on a brand new, fully loaded SUV, the one you told me you were just leasing, and another $10,000 in credit card bills, Louis Vuitton, spa treatments. You weren't paying for Mary's dream. You were pay. NG off your debts. Martha let out a small, strangled sound. You didn't just steal from me, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You stole from Mary, you stole from Leo, you stole from the trust. You lied to everyone. Leo looked like he was going to be sick. Mom, Dad, is that true? It's complicated, Leo, my father blustered, but his voice had no power. It's just moving money around. It's all family money. It's not, I snapped, and for the first time I raised my voice. The money you moved was my personal savings, and the lies you told were to cover up your own financial ruin. You were going to let Mary get kicked out of school. You were going to let this entire family implode just to cover your tracks. My mother burst into a fresh wail. We were going to pay it back, we just needed time. You don't have any more time, I said. You committed a crime, and now I'm exercising my rights as trustee. The dissolution proceeds. You can't, my father yelled. I can, I said. You gave me the power when you opened my safe. You've been bleeding this family dry for years, and I've been enabling it. No more. This isn't a family anymore. This is an asset liquidation. What about me? Leo suddenly shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. What about my brewery? You're going to sell the building? You're going to bankrupt me, Becca. I didn't do this. Didn't you? I turned to him, my gaze pitiless. You've been sitting here, benefiting from a lease that is 70% below market rate, paid for by the trust. You've watched them do this to me my entire life, and you have never said a word. You're not a victim, Leo. You're collateral damage. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. My father lunged, his hand raised. You ungrateful. I didn't even flinch. Touch me, Dad, please. Add assault to the police report. Give me grounds for a restraining order. See how that plays out in front of the probate judge. He froze, his hand trembling in the air. This is over, I said, pulling my keys out. The house is being put on the market in 30 days. You will receive a formal notice of eviction. Leo, your lease is terminated. You have 60 days to vacate the premises. Where are we supposed to go? My mother whispered, her face ashen. What are we supposed to do? I looked at her, at the woman who had smiled while robbing me. That, I said, sounds like a you problem. You wanted me to stop being the fixer? Congratulations, I just quit. I walked out and locked the door behind me. The days that followed were a siege. My family, realizing their usual tactics of intimidation and guilt were useless, became desperate. They tried new, pathetic angles. First came the flying monkeys. My aunt, my father's sister, called me. Rebecca, I've heard there's some disagreement. Your mother is distraught. You know your father's temper. Surely you can all sit down and sort this out like a family. He's your father. Did he tell you he broke into my home and stole $50,000, Aunt Clara? A flustered silence. Well, he said it was a misunderstanding about family money. It was a crime, I have to go. Click. Then came Mary. She showed up at my condo, pounding on the door. I'd seen her coming on the lobby camera and didn't buzz her in. She called me, sobbing. Becca, they're cutting off my meal plan. The school says the tuition was never paid. I'm going to be kicked out. You have to fix this. This isn't my fault. It is, actually, I said, my voice calm through the speakerphone. You scouted my condo. You were part of the conspiracy. You can get a loan, Mary, or you can get a job, or you can drop out. Those are your options. Do not come here again. Her sobs turned to rage. She screamed a string of curses at me that would have made a sailor blush, all of which I calmly recorded. But the most desperate and most dangerous was my father. He thought he could outsmart me. He thought I was just a bean counter, and he was a businessman. He had his own lawyer send Alina a letter. It was a joke, full of bluster, accusing me of breach of fiduciary duty. It claimed I was emotionally compromised and acting out of spite. It demanded that I be removed as trustee and that the trust be handed over to a neutral third party, namely him and my mother. Alina was delighted. They've just officially countersued, she told me over the phone, practically purring. This is wonderful. It means we get to file for discovery. They've just handed us the legal right to subpoena every single one of their financial records for the last 10 years. Oh, I said, that is wonderful. My father's brief, idiotic legal challenge had just given me permission to take my private investigator's findings and make them official court documents. But the investigation wasn't done. Mark, my PI, was digging deeper. The brokerage account your dad funded with your money, he said on our next C. It's worse than I thought. It's not just bad gambling. It's linked to an offshore account. And that account has seen some very strange activity. It looks like he was trying to hide assets, not just from you, but from, well, everyone. Keep digging, I said. The real breakdown, however, came from Leo. He was the weak link. He had the most to lose, and he was the least equipped to handle it. His brewery was his entire identity. It was also, as I knew from the trust's financials, massively in debt. The only thing keeping it afloat was the ridiculously cheap rent he paid to the trust. He came to my office. I'd returned to work, needing the structure, the sense of normalcy. He bypassed security, tailgating someone through the main doors, and burst into my office, wild-eyed. Rebecca, he shouted. My colleague's head snapped up. I calmly stood up, closed my office door, and motioned for him to sit. He ignored me, pacing in front of my desk. You're not kidding, he said, his voice ragged. You're really doing it. The for sale sign just went up on my building. It's not your building, Leo. It's the trust's building. It's my life. Rebecca, I'll be ruined. I'll have to declare bankruptcy. I'll lose everything. My apartment, my everything. That is the consequence of your parents' actions, Leo. My parents, he scoffed, a bitter, desperate sound. You're the one pulling the trigger. You can stop this. You can just not sell my building, punish them. Sell the house, but leave me out of it. You are a beneficiary just like them. The clause is clear. The assets must be liquidated and distributed. I can't pick and choose. That's a lie, he yelled. Elena told me you have sole discretion, you can do whatever you want, and you're choosing to ruin me. They stole $50,000, Leo, I said, my voice hard as ice. Where were you when they were bleeding me dry for my entire adult life? Where were you when they were planning this? You were sitting there, drinking your craft beer in your under-Market Trent brewery, happy to let me be the bad guy as long as you got yours. That's not fair. It's the truth, I said. You're just as complicit as they are, you're just a coward. His face crumpled. He wasn't a bad man, not really. He was just weak, and my parents had preyed on that weakness his whole life, just as they'd preyed on my strength. What do you want from me, Becca? He whispered, finally sinking into the chair. I'll do anything. Please don't take my business. I looked at him, my brother. The boy who'd once taught me to ride a bike and then stood by as our parents dismantled my self-esteem. I want the truth, I said. I want a signed, notarized affidavit. I want you to tell me everything you know about the theft, about their finances, about their debts, about every time they've borrowed from the trust from you, from anyone. I want you to be a witness, for me, against them. He stared at me, the color draining from his face. You want me to testify against Mom and Dad. I want you to pick a side, Leo, for the first time in your life. Them, I said, gesturing to the window, or your future. Because if you side with them, I promise you, you will go down with them. If you help me, if you come clean, I might be able to carve you out of the liquidation. It was a bluff, sort of. As trustee, I did have discretion. I could potentially sell the building to him under a new, ironclad market-rate mortgage. I could save him, but he had to earn it. He looked at his hands. I could see the war inside him. The lifetime of fear battling the sudden, terrifying prospect of losing it all. They're worse than you think, Becca, he finally said, his voice barely audible. It wasn't just your 50,000. They've been skimming from the brewery. Small amounts for months. I let them. I was afraid to stop them. My blood ran cold. What? They said they needed it for operating expenses. They have a key to my safe, too. This was bigger than I thought. This wasn't just theft from me. This was systematic fraud. Against the trust. Against their own son. Go to Elena's office, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Tell her everything. Sign the affidavit. Now, Leo, go. He nodded, a broken, terrified man, and fled my office. The case wasn't just building. It was an avalanche, and my father's idiotic lawsuit was about to get buried under it. The showdown was not, as I'd imagined, in a courtroom. It was, fittingly, at a dinner. My Aunt Clara, in a last-ditch effort to heal the family, had invited us all to a local country club for a reconciliation dinner. My parents had accepted, seeing it as a public stage to ambush me and play the victims. They'd been bleeding support from the wider family as rumors of the real story, backed by Leo's quiet, terrified confessions, had begun to circulate. They needed a win. I accept. Ed, too, I told Elena to be there. Just as a friend, I'd said, I'm buying you dinner, she'd smiled. Of course, I'll bring my briefcase. I arrived last. My parents, Martha and George, were at the center of a large, round table, already holding court with my aunt and uncle. Mary was there, looking thin and sullen. Leo was sitting as far from them as possible, staring at his water glass. When I walked in, the conversation stopped. I saw my mother's face tighten. My father's eyes narrowed. I smiled pleasantly and took the seat next to Leo, placing Elena on my other side. Rebecca, dear, Aunt Clara said, her voice strained. So glad you could make it. We were just catching up. Were we? I asked, unfolding my napkin. What were we catching up on, the lawsuit or the police report? My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough! Rebecca, you have embarrassed this family for the last time. You are going to drop this psychotic legal attack tonight, or I will see to it that you are not only removed as trustee, but disbarred from your profession. Elena cleared her throat. That's disbarred for lawyers, George. For a CPA, it's revoking her license. And given that she's the one who uncovered felony fraud, I'd say her license is quite safe. Yours, on the other hand. My father's gaze snapped to her. Who the hell are you? I'm Alina, she said, smiling brightly. I'm the attack dog lawyer. And you're the man who's been committing wire fraud. The silence that fell was absolute. Aunt Clara looked horrified. What is she talking about, George? My uncle asked, shifting uncomfortably. She's lying, Martha shrieked, her voice cracking. She's trying to confuse you. Rebecca, tell them this is just a misunderstanding. It's not, I said. I looked at my father. My investigator found the offshore account, Dad, the one you've been using to hide assets, the one you funded with the money you stole from Leo's brewery safe, the money you stole from my safe. George went white. And your lawsuit against me, demanding I be removed? I shook my head, almost pitying him. That was the stupidest thing you could have possibly done. It gave us the right to subpoena everything, and we did. I nodded to Alina. She unlatched her briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound document. She slid it across the table to my father. That, Alina said, is the full forensic audit of your life, George. We have the wire transfers to the offshore account. We have the statements from the casino you're a high roller at. We have the proof that you've been skimming from your own son's business to the tune of $75,000. And we have the affidavit from your son, Leo, detailing your systematic and ongoing fraud. Leo, bless him, didn't flinch. He just stared at his father, his fear finally replaced by a cold, hard anger. My father's hands were trembling. He opened the binder. His eyes scanned the first page, a summary of his own financial ruin, his own crimes. This is illegal, he whispered. You spied on me. You sued me, I corrected him. It's called discovery, and it's what happens when you commit a crime and then try to blame the victim. My mother was staring at the document, her eyes wide with a horror that had nothing to do with me. George, she whispered, a casino, offshore, what? What did you do? He was robbing all of us, Mom, I said quietly. He wasn't just paying off debts. He was building an escape hatch for himself. He was going to leave you and Mary and all of us to hold the bag. That's a lie, George roared, but the denial was weak, hollow. Is it? Alina said. Because we also have the preliminary application for a condo in the Cayman Islands. In your name only. That was it. That was the final, killing blow. Martha let out a sound I'd never heard before, a deep animal wail of pure betrayal. Mary, who had been watching this like a tennis match, finally understood. Her father hadn't just stolen for her, he'd stolen from her. You. Martha was hyperventilating, pointing a trembling finger at my father. All of it, the money, my money, it's all gone. There is no my money, Mom, I said. There is only the trust, and you are all, as of this moment, in breach. My father stood up, his chair scraping back. He looked around the table, at his horrified sister, his disgusted brother-in-law, his weeping wife, his furious daughter, and his 2 children who were now united against him. He was cornered, exposed, finished. He didn't say a word. He just turned, and in a shuffling, broken gait, he walked out of the restaurant. The silence he left behind was deafening. My mother was sobbing into her hands. Mary looked catatonic. Leo was the one who broke it. He looked across the table at me, his eyes clear for the first time in his life. So, he said, his voice shaking but firm, what comes next? Becca. I picked up my water glass. What comes next, I said, is that we settle this, my way. The downfall was not a single crash, it was a controlled demolition. With my father gone, a fugitive from his own life, the fight went out of my mother. Her world had collapsed, not because of my actions, but because of his. The man she had enabled and allied with for 40 years had been planning to abandon her. That was a betrayal far deeper than any bad actor clause. She and Mary were left with nothing. My father, in his arrogance, had put all their joint assets into his secret accounts. In fleeing, he'd frozen them both out. The irony was bitter, and it was total. We met in Alina's office 2 weeks later. My father was not present. He was, as we'd learned, already in a non-extradition country, which was its own kind of prison. My mother and Mary sat on one side of the large conference table. They looked small, exhausted, and cheap in their off-brand clothes. The designer labels had been the first to go. Leo sat beside me. "Here is the offer," I said, and I slid a new agreement across the table. "It is the only offer you will get. If you do not sign it, I will proceed with the full liquidation. The house will be sold. The brewery building will be sold. The trust will be dissolved, and your shares, what's left of them after I've recouped the stolen funds, the legal fees, and the damages, will be negligible." My mother flinched. "Or," I continued, "you sign this. This is a new beneficiary agreement. You," I looked at my mother, "will renounce all claims to the trust. You will no longer be a beneficiary. You will no longer receive a dividend. You will, however, be permitted to live in the family home as a tenant." "A tenant," she whispered. "You will sign a formal lease. You will pay rent. It will be below market rate, but it will be paid every month. If you miss a payment, you will be evicted. The trust will pay for the utilities and the taxes, but your free ride is over." "But how can I pay?" she stammered. "I have nothing. He took everything." "Then I suggest you get a job," I said, my voice not unkind, just firm. "Like I did." I then looked at Mary. "You will also renounce your beneficiary status. The trust will not be paying for your art school. It will, however, provide a one-time, non-negotiable sum of $10,000 for you to enroll in a state college or a certified trade school. You will submit your transcripts to me every semester. If you fail a class, the funding stops. You will also get a part-time job." Mary just nodded, her eyes on the table. The fight was gone, replaced by a dazed, reluctant acceptance. Finally, I looked at Leo. "Leo, your old lease is terminated. You will sign a new 5-year lease for the brewery building. The rent will be at 90% of the current market rate, not 30%. In exchange for your testimony and for the fraud you endured, the trust will offer you a one-time, zero-interest loan to cover the debts your father incurred. You will pay it back, every penny." He looked at me and his eyes were wet. "Becca, that's fair. That's more than fair. Thank you." "Don't thank me," I said. "This is just the new set of rules. I'm no longer the fixer, Leo. I'm just the trustee. From now on, everything is by the book." My mother and Mary signed. Their hands shook, but they signed. The power dynamic, which had been broken for my entire life, had finally been reset. The resolution wasn't loud. It was the quiet scratch of pens on paper. A month later, I was at my condo, packing, but I wasn't fleeing. I was moving. The sale of one of the trust's smaller, underperforming properties had finalized, and I had used my own legal, hard-earned commission and savings to buy the house on the coast. My out was now just my home. Leo came by to help me load boxes. We worked in a comfortable silence for a while. "Heard from Mom?" I asked, taping up a box labeled kitchen. "Yeah," he said, lifting it. "She got a job, a receptionist at a doctor's office. She hates it." "She'll get used to it," I said. "And married." "Enrolled at the community college," I said. "Drafting and design, she's actually good, and she's working at a coffee shop. She complains, but I think she's weirdly proud of herself." "And him?" Leo asked, not meeting my eye. "His lawyer contacted Alina," I said. "He wants to negotiate a return of his assets. Alina sent back a copy of the police report and the arrest warrant. We haven't heard back." We loaded the last box into the truck. Leo leaned against the side, wiping his forehead. "Becca," he said, I know sorry doesn't cut it." "No," I said, "it doesn't. But I was a coward. I'm going to spend a long time making it up to you, starting with paying back that loan, with interest." I smiled, a real smile. The agreement was zero interest, Leo. "My terms," he said, holding out a hand. "You're my sister, I should have acted. Ed like it, I'm going to from now on." I shook his hand. "I'd like that, Leo, I'd really like that."